counterproductive. We already have a flaming fire in this country, and it's like taking a bunch of gasoline and pouring it on top of the fire.
Florida Senator Marco Rubio doesn't want to hear about an impeachment trial. He doesn't want to know what responsibility Donald Trump or his Republican allies in Congress bear for their roles in inciting the violence on the symbol of American democracy. He would like to move on from the insurrection that resulted in at least 5 deaths, including at least 1 Capitol police officer, and the injuries of many more officers who protected Rubio and other lawmakers from the violent mob. Move on, he says, for unity. But historically, Rubio has valued accountability insofar as it's a political weapon to use against Democrats. Here's what he said about the attack in Benghazi that killed 4 Americans, including 2 Navy SEALs and Ambassador Christopher Stevens, an event that occurred while President Obama was in the White House and Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State.
This is not about politics. This is about accountability. Someone needs to be held accountable for what's happened here, but it's also about preventing this from happening in the future. This is not about hurting anybody politically. This is about getting to the truth.
But Rubio's perspective on accountability changes more quickly than the weather on a Florida afternoon.
You know, some of them, unfortunately, are adherents of conspiracy theories. Others got caught up in the moment, and the result was a national embarrassment.
Caught up in the moment. That's what he says. Prosecutors are now charging some of these rioters with conspiracy. They're saying that these groups planned and plotted this, that they arrived dressed for war, many of whom said they came because the president told them to. And it was only after that riot that Rubio piped up to say that then Vice President Mike Pence could not overturn the election.
Many of those in that mob were believers in a ridiculous conspiracy theory, and others were lied to by politicians that were telling them that the vice president had the power to change the election results.
But Rubio fails to mention another group of politicians, those who stood idly by, silent in the days and weeks leading up to the breach, like him. He didn't publicly counter this lie until after he was whisked away to safety in the Capitol, and it was too late. He didn't contradict Trump when the president told supporters that he would win the presidency if Mike Pence comes through for them. Now, we reached out to Senator Rubio today. There was no response yet. But when the Miami Herald contacted him for a reason why, he had no comment. His office had no comment. Marco Rubio is not alone, though, as he takes a pass on holding President Trump accountable. He finds himself in the same place as Republicans who voted to overturn the results of a Democratic election, like House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy.
A vote to impeach would further divide this nation. A vote to impeach will further fan the flames of partisan division.
Understanding where Kevin McCarthy stands at any one moment has been harder than traversing California's grapevine in the winter. He has swerved from lane to lane and back again since the riot, careening more clumsily than a runaway tractor trailer. Remember, before the Capitol siege, he had challenged the election of Joe Biden in the courts, in Congress, and also on TV, and he refused to acknowledge that Biden was president-elect until the riot, when he realized then that the game had become real.
The president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters.
I don't believe he provoked if you listen to what he said at the rally.
I also think everybody across this country has some responsibility.
You do you, leader. And like Rubio, Kevin McCarthy incessantly pushed Benghazi investigations. Unlike Rubio, McCarthy said the quiet part out loud, that it wasn't so much about accountability as politics.
Everybody thought Hillary Clinton was unbeatable, right? But we put together a Benghazi special committee, a select committee. What are her numbers today? Her numbers are dropping. Why? Because she's untrustable. But no one would have known any of that had happened had we not thought.
That was a whoopsie-daisy, and McCarthy admitted as much.
Well, that wasn't helpful. Yeah, I mean, I could have said it much better. But this Benghazi committee was only created for one purpose: to find the truth on behalf of the families for the 4 dead Americans.
He values finding the truth on behalf of the families of dead Americans, unless it isn't politically prudent for him, even as he struggles to figure out what is politically prudent for him. And then there's Lindsey Graham.
You talk about unifying the country. If you do not stand up against the impeachment of President Trump after he leaves office, you're an incredibly weak figure in American history.
So it's weak, he says, to pursue accountability for an attack on U.S. soil at the U.S. Capitol against a Congress certifying the outcome of a Democratic presidential election. Weak, says Lindsey Graham, who is usually a hawk, who was all for Congress holding people to account after an attack on a U.S. compound not too long ago.
I consider this a major national security failure that you could see coming, that no one's been held accountable for yet, and that to have accountability, you have to have information. Why can't we talk to the people who were attacked and hear from them what happened in Benghazi? If that's too much for Congress to ask, God help us all. And this reluctance and unwillingness and refusal to allow the Congress to talk to the people who were on the ground during the attack will not stand. And we're asking something that's reasonable. And we're demanding action, not because we're Republicans, but because the nation needs to know how these people died, what the administration actually knew, and were they misled by the administration 8 weeks before an election.
He said if it's too much for Congress to ask for accountability, God help us all. Well, this all has nothing to do with accountability, and it is weak to pretend that it does. Next, new details about one of the rioters accused of attacking police in the Capitol riots. His own brother is a Secret Service agent who used to protect Michelle Obama. Plus, Dr. Deborah Birx, a former member of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, becomes the latest Trump official trying to change the narrative about her role in the disastrous pandemic response. See how her story has changed.